Good morning. We will pay attention to the ledger accounts for a service undertaking. In a service undertaking, they don't buy goods with the purpose of selling to make a profit. They render a service, for instance, a hairdresser, plumber, electrician, bookkeeper, etc. Mr. Peterson deposited 20,000 Rand in the current bank account of the business as his capital contribution. So money was put into the bank, so my one entry will be in the bank account, and it is for capital, so my double entry will be in the capital account. The capital account will be credited with 20,000. Capital always has a credit balance and always increases on the credit side. And I will indicate that I will debit the bank account. So the word that I write in the account indicates where is the double entry. In the bank account, I will debit the bank with 20,000 and indicate that the double entry was completed in the capital account. Bank is an asset increase on the debit side, decrease on the credit side. We've got more money in the bank, that's why we debit the bank account. A cheque for 12,000 was issued to Milan Traders for the purchase of chairs, hairdressers, mirrors for the salon, etc. So that means we've taken money out of the bank, so the one double entry will be in the bank. We bought all these things that we need in the business, that is equipment for the business, so the double entry will be in equipment. Equipment is an asset. Asset increases on the debit side and decrease on the credit side. We will increase the equipment with a total value of 12,000 to indicate that my asset increased, and we will credit the bank account. The double entry is completed on the credit side of the bank account to indicate that there's less money in the bank and that the double entry was completed in the equipment account. Paid Maggie suppliers for service material purchase. So we've taken money out of the bank, so the one entry will be in the bank, and we bought service material. That means it's the shampoos and conditioners, colorants and things like that you use in the business. So first of all, we will show that the bank account is credited because the money in the bank is reduced, and we will debit the material account. The material account is debited because it's an expense. We buy the goods to use in the business. Expenses increase on the debit side and decrease on the credit side. So we've paid for more expenses that increases on the debit side. Additional equipment was purchased from Milan Traders. So it means that the equipment was increased. So we will debit equipment. We buy it on credit from Milan Traders. So Milan Traders is a creditor. That is a liability that will be paid in the future. We will debit the equipment account to indicate that the asset increased on the debit side, and we will credit Milan Traders to indicate that the liability increases on the credit side. Milan Traders is a liability because it's a creditor, and we indicate that we owe more money to the creditor, and that means this is money that we will pay out in the future, and we indicate that the equipment account was debited. Cash received for services rendered. Cash register role. So it means that we received money, so the one entry will be in the bank. Why did we receive the money? For the services that we rendered. So we did hair for people, and that means services rendered will be our double entry. The bank account will be debited to indicate that more money is put into the bank, so the asset increased with 1840, and services rendered will be credited with the 1840 to indicate that services rendered increased on the credit side. Because this is an income always increases on the credit side and decrease on the debit side. A receipt was issued for 200 for rent received. If we issue a receipt, it means that we receive money. So the money was put into the bank. So the one entry will be in the bank account. What did we receive the money for? For rent. So the double entry will be in the rent account. The bank increased, so we will debit the bank to increase the money in the bank, and we will credit the rent income account. Rent income is credited because it is an income, and income increases on the credit side. So we want to show that the income of the business increased with the 200 that we received in the bank. At the end of the month, we will balance our accounts. If there are only one amount on the credit side, that is automatically your balance. On the debit side of the equipment account, we've got two amounts, so we must add it together to show that the balance in the equipment account is 16,900. In the bank account, we have amounts on both sides. That means that we add up the bigger side, in this case the debit side, and we add up the figures and we get a total of 22,040. Take this amount and subtract the amounts on the credit side to see what is the difference between the debit side and the credit side, and that will give me the balancing figure of 1540. That is entered above the total, so that when I add up the three amounts, including the balance, it must give me the same total as the one that we had on the debit side. This is my balance that I calculate that will be carried down on the opposite side on the first day of the next month. So that indicates that we will start June with 1,540 in the bank. In the total line, you are not allowed to write any words next to that total, and the two totals must always be on the same line, and they have to be the same figure. All these other accounts only have one figure in them, so that will automatically be the total in that account or the balance. What did we learn? For each transaction, we have to complete a double entry. For every transaction, a double entry will include one entry on the debit side and one entry on the credit side. The credit hand side of the ledger is your debit side. The right hand side of the ledger is your credit side. When entries were completed on both sides of the ledger, the account was balanced to determine what is the difference between the debit and the credit side, and that balance will be brought down on the opposite side of the account on the first day of the next month.